Welcome to the Moving Humanity Forward podcast. My name is Kathy Malajani, and every week we aim to bring you inspirational stories, conversations on success, resilience, as well as entrepreneurship. We dive deep into the stories of trailblazers, and we're interested in people who paved the way and go ahead and share their story with us on how you too can follow that path of your life's dreams and follow your purpose and make your way to your next step. Be sure to subscribe to our pages, MHF Podcast on Facebook, and you can find us on YouTube as well as on TikTok by typing Moving Humanity Forward Podcast. With that said, our guest this week is somebody who is a personal friend. I literally call him my brother from another mother. We almost shared a birthday, and he is a man that wears so very many hats that I think it best for me to let him introduce himself and share the many hats. He says he's going to summarize them and he won't really get into all of the hats that he actually wears. I like to call him GM, which actually is Grandmaster. He is a martial arts expert. And well, let him break it down for us and share his hats. Grandmaster Scott, thank you for joining us on the Moving Humanity Forward podcast and welcome to it.
Thank you very much, sis. I think I can call you sis now because we have that relationship. Welcome. Thank you for having me. It's been an honor and a pleasure to be here. As mentioned, for the sake of our viewers, the title is Grandmaster. I'm known here in Botswana as Grandmaster Scott. I'm the current founder of the International Kung Fu and Healing Center Botswana, a program of Chinese martial arts, traditional Chinese martial arts from Shaolin and the Wudang disciplines. I'm also the current African continent president of the International Chinese Martial Arts Federation, International Wushu Sanxiao Federation, that has to deal with Chinese martial arts as well. As mentioned, wear a bunch of different hats in the community. I won't go into this long list of accolades and credentials right now, but suffice it to say, I know what I'm doing.
I mean, and the hats include, I think, some of the things we have in common. You have acted before.
Yes.
You are a voiceover artist as well. And this one we don't have in common. You are also somebody with a military background.
Yeah. Retired military, U.S. Marine Special Forces. That was an experience all in itself, and one that I thank God I'm still here alive to talk about it off camera. Off air, we were discussing some of the particulars and some of the other things that I found to be interesting in that. But it was an experience for a young man to be part of. It also took me around the world into some places I normally may not have gotten to see. And a lot of that, believe it or not, here on the African continent, in those war-torn countries and areas as conflict breaks out, Middle East, places like that. Also, I've had combat training experience with some of the bases where I'm was based in at the time in Houston. San Antonio was one. San Antonio had Lackland Air Force Base where I taught there. Also at Fort Sam Houston, which at the time was a joint military base there as well too. So combat skills and that type of stuff, coupled with my years in martial arts, also helped to mold me and make me into the person that I am here today.
So there's so much that I'd like us to cover. I have a sinking suspicion that we probably will need a part 2 of this conversation. But let's do this and allow me to just be candid with you. The minute you say military, I think some of these questions we all have, so allow me to pose some of them to you.
By all means.
Have you ever seen a dead person? Have you? Yeah, let's start there.
Yeah, of course I have. But oddly enough, the first dead person that I saw was growing up when I was a young boy in the ghettos of Houston, Texas, growing up in an area called Fifth Ward. It was a ghetto that makes Soweto, or old Soweto as we knew it during apartheid times, look like Disneyland.
Wow.
Look like Alice in Wonderland. It was really rife with prostitution, illegal drugs, gang violence, you name it, even police brutality.
Wow.
During that time. Because again, we're talking about coming off the cusp the civil rights movement, 60s, 70s, that type of stuff. So yeah, I saw death. Even in fact, my best friend, a young man by the name of Lee White. I think I can say that now. I'm pretty sure there's a bunch of Lee Whites all over the world. So trying to find this one in particular. My best friend, he unfortunately was breaking into a neighbor's house that lived 2 streets over, and they sent him back through the window with a 12 gauge shotgun.
And you saw that?
Yeah, yeah, because I was up with the parents that night actually looking for him. Again, kids playing in the ghetto, that type of stuff. And it wasn't too late night, maybe 10:30, 11 o'clock. But, older people, sometimes they go to sleep early.
Yeah.
I realize that now, being older myself. We go to sleep early, and it was just a situation. We heard the gunshot from a couple of blocks away, but myself and a couple of my sisters and Mr. White and Mrs. White, his parents, had rounded the corner just because, again, you got hobos and bums hanging out late night. Yeah, like, where's Lee? We saw him last on the street. So we're walking around there, and we only saw the body come out of the window. Yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah.
So this, how old are you at this point?
12, 13 years old.
Yeah. And at the time, was it just, oh, okay, we keep it moving, life goes on? Was it something that stayed with you?
Yeah, it definitely stayed with me. Again, not involved in military operations like I was now. And I mean, you see that kind of stuff on TV, war shows and detective shows and action shows as we had back in the 70s and the 80s. You see that stuff on TV, but to see it actually face to face, and even more importantly, somebody that you knew.
Yeah, somebody close to you.
Yeah. I mean, this guy was my best friend. We used to play American football in the streets as we used to tackle on the pavement and touch football in the grass, which was crazy. But yeah, I remember all those times. So it did stick with me for years and years after that, and it did something to me. Yeah.
I'd like to forward a little bit now to where because you've listened, and this is just some of the accolades, because you really have a very impressive CV, and you are now, I'd like you to paint the picture for us as you are moving into a battlefield, because now with the military experience and, so take me through what that's like as you are stepping into a place where you are potentially going to be the one bringing that deadly force and potentially killing other people.
Oh, wow. As we talked about off air, it varies from person to person. My experience wouldn't be the same experience as somebody else had, but for me personally, it was very surreal, because what I had learned through the military was not what I was taught as a young man growing up. So it was always a conflict. If you're familiar with military training, they hone you to be basically a
machine.
Yeah,
killing machine.
Pretty much, all in the commission of duties for the country and pride. So those of us who've been in the military before, we know what it's all about. But stepping into that battlefield for the first time and being on mission, there's always that thought, nothing else in the world matters at the time, but these 3 things based on mission objectives. Number 1 was identifying target identification, making sure through logistics that you got from commanders or sometime enemy insurgents, that you knew where everybody was. So making sure you followed mission objectives. 2, rescuing any hostages, whether they be friendlies or whether they be people who you would say, okay, this is our objective. This is who we're going in to get to extract and bring back. And thirdly, but I think probably most importantly, was making sure you and your squad got back to base in one piece. Yeah.
Okay. Real quick. And you just said a word that I wonder, would that make a difference if you think about the people that you're going into this battle against? If you think about that person as a target and not a human, does that make it easier? Are you able to share your first experience of taking a life?
I've never been asked that question before, but now that you mention it, because of the training that we were put through, I can't talk about any other military training, but I know in the States is very intensive type training. So mentally, you're already prepared for that. And at the time when you go into combat, you don't really think about the humanity
of the person.
Yeah, that's the enemy. You shoot them, you survive, and you get out.
Yeah.
It's not really until afterwards that you survive and you look around and thank God and I'm here, that you really maybe the humanity factors click in, because at the time is it religion goes out the door, ethnic origin goes out the door. It's just that's the enemy. We kill the enemy. That's who we shoot and we get back. So
for you, what was the experience like? You didn't think about it?
No, I didn't think about it at the time. Young, impressionable, gung ho to do what I needed to do for my country. It was it. That's the enemy. That's the target. You target identification. You kill it. Maintain your objective and get back. That was it. It wasn't until really a few years later, um, listening to politics and governmental what with different factions in our government and world politics and dynamics across that to it really start now affecting you as to the humanity part of it. These people, what are they fighting for? Why is America here? What are we doing? Are we doing more harm than good being here? These people are fighting for freedoms and religious reasons, or hungry or persecution or whatever. They're fighting for their causes. We're fighting for theirs. So it wasn't until years later till really those dynamics start to gel. And as an individual, I start to think about these things going forward. Yeah.
This is the Moving Humanity Forward podcast, and we are going to continue this conversation in a bit. I'd like to ask you to subscribe to our page on YouTube. If you type Moving Humanity Forward podcast, you'll find it there, as well as on TikTok. And if you are on Facebook, if you type MHF podcast, you will find us. So be right back. Don't you go anywhere. This is the Moving Humanity Forward podcast. My name is Kathy Malajani, and today we are in conversation with an ex-military martial arts specialist, if I can call him that. I also call him my older brother, my brother from another mother. And one of the things you had just spoken to us, Grandmaster Scott, was the fact that you had this experience. You're in battle. You've taken a life. You don't think about it at that point in time. But I'd like you to get into a bit of detail about what happens that day when you get home, that night as you're about to sleep. Does this come back to you? Do you get haunted by the thoughts, what happens? Take us through. Was this, at a point where you're able to get counseling the same day? Are you out somewhere where you don't have that access to the psychosocial support? What is that like for you?
Well, at the time, they didn't really understand the importance of having psychosocial people on the ground.
What year is this? Give us a time.
Early 90s.
Okay.
Early 90s.
Okay.
First Gulf War, places like that, and then fast forward into some other stuff that I did late 90s and early 2000s. Yeah, but it was a while before I was able to, of course, return to base.
Yeah.
And then even a while after that before I was able to secure the necessary attention that I needed to help me deal with trauma.
Did you think you needed support at the time?
No,
that night?
No, I didn't think I needed it until I started having nightmares.
So that night you slept?
No, that night, yeah, I was again young, fresh, on guard, happy to be doing my duty and feeling a sense of security because the base was secure in as much. But yeah, it wasn't until really a couple of missions afterwards it starts really, really, really sinking in, and the nightmares come because a lot of people were kids. In that war, same thing as you might see here in some African countries with child soldiers.
Yeah.
There also was Afghan youths carrying AK-47. I mean, and they became in war. There's no friendly targets, so to speak.
Yeah.
I'll have to tell a story at a later time about the real reason things happen that kicked off that first Gulf War. I'm not at liberties to discuss it right now.
Yeah.
But we'll go into that at a later time. But in answer to your question, just getting the psychosocial services that I needed immediately wasn't done, and probably that was my fault because again I was there in rotation and getting ready to go back out. But in time, after a few sorties, yeah, you have to seek it because it becomes a bit too much for a lot of enlisted people. You know, we want to deal with it from a macho perspective and stuff, but you have to look at the human factor that it takes a toll on your brain
Yeah.
because nobody was a born killer,
Yeah.
so to speak, although a lot of us have those tendencies, but nobody was a born killer. So it was always a conflict between the way I was raised against the way I was taught. So yeah. And PTSD is real too.
I was actually about to get into that because post-traumatic stress disorder is something that anytime we think veterans,
Yeah.
we associate that with. So I'd like you to just break that down for me to say, okay, it wasn't until you started getting nightmares.
Yeah.
What are some of the other things that because with everything, I believe it shows up different for people differently,
It does.
right? So what was it for you? The PTSD was the nightmares. What else was it?
Well, it was the nightmares. It was the times that we were out on patrol. The sleep deprivation was also part of that. Not that it was forced, but just because you had to stay up and stay vigilant and then just sleeping in shifts, not necessarily getting the needed sleep that you needed. Because of course I'm on a mission, so it's not like I could pop a pill and sleep fast and then pop another one to wake me up. So those things came into it. And as years progressed and as you saw more on the battlefield and as you became sensitive to maybe people's needs or the needs in your squad from people there, PTSD began to develop. And with me, it was nightmares. Again, we hear about it and see it on TV and radio and movies and that type of stuff. Oh, I saw the faces of dead people. Yeah, you do, because again, it's not human nature to kill people.
Yeah.
But it has that effect. So the nightmares that I was having once I rotated back to the States, sleeping, as I mentioned before, my sisters used to have to wake me up with a broom handle.
Why?
Because I was in a zone, Kathy. I was in a total zone, and sleeping where I used to sleep with my guns underneath my pillow. So, if you came in and just tried to wake me up or touch me or made loud noises, it was an automatic response.
Wow.
Ready to rock and roll with whatever I had there. So they got in the habit of poking me because when I wrote,
then they wouldn't be near you.
Yeah, because I still slept with actual guns under my under my
You
pillow.
mentioned feeling safe and secure at the base that night first. So did you not feel safe anymore? Is this why now you have the guns under your pillows?
Yeah, because again, the military has that type of environment where everybody looks out for everybody else. And I know the man next to me is locked and loaded with whatever ordnance he or she may have. I know the base perimeters was secure. So of course it had that type of environment. And then rotating out into civilian life is something totally different. I know I'm inside my house and there's no moats. There's no incendiary devices on the perimeter. I'm at home and I'm exposed. Even though it might be family or friends or whoever around, it's not the same sense of security that I would have being surrounded by all this $1 billion armament and military stuff. Yeah.
When you're in base. Okay, so I want to tie this in a little bit to the Khonzi movement because that's something that you and I have spoken about this, and we'll get to it, where you saw a headline and it was something that spoke to you so deeply. It really inspired you, basically moving from the Caribbeans to Botswana. That's a story we'll get into as we go on. But I'd like to just get the understanding of the PTSD that you obviously have experienced and how somebody who's surviving gender-based violence actually goes through something similar.
It's funny because long story short, back in 2018, Botswana held the desert race that year. I think it was in Jwaneng.
Yes, we
And
had it every year. Yeah.
that year, I'll never forget it. It was a Monitor newspaper that actually covered the story, and it read, "Woman dies at desert race," and then the next page was this full color ad of this woman's naked, abused, raped um, um, body, and I had flashbacks at the time of seeing, because I've been in areas where they've had similar occurrences, although from a war perspective, a battle perspective, it was still the same thing.
Yeah.
So PTSD kind of kicked in right there, flashbacks and all that stuff. But it did something to me individually. And I'm thinking, wow, this woman was raped and then murdered. And I'm thinking to myself, had she known some type of self-defense, some type of martial arts in any shape, form, and fashion to protect herself, maybe it would be different. Maybe she'd still be alive, maybe with a few bruises and cuts and that type of stuff, but she wouldn't be dead.
Yeah.
So PTSD from that, and I can only imagine how it would affect similar survivors of gender-based violence, those who have been victims and survivors. I don't like to use the term victim, but survivors of GBV, and how PTSD has affected them, although they may not speak about it. But definitely, I think there's some need for psychosocial services and counseling. At least I had access to it in the military and after I came back. But what is needed, and do they have access to such on a level that is needed here in Botswana for victims of gender-based violence?
So take me through the thinking, because you mentioned how it's in your head, and the unfortunate issue that happens time and again with survivors of assault, right?
Yeah.
Regardless of, and it's becoming more and more prevalent, unfortunately. Botswana statistics showing that we are really ranked highest in the world as far as assault cases are concerned. And so take me through the thinking of, okay, so this is something in the mind, and you just put it to say, what could they have done with their fists? What can I do? I would like just to know what your thoughts were. You said it spoke to you individually. What did it speak to you, and how did you then decide to act on that?
Well, it spoke to me in as much as this was an innocent person being in. Just like in any war-torn conflict on both sides, there's innocent people, regardless of what the politics and what have you of the matter and the issue is. There's innocent people on both sides. And it spoke to me in as much as, again, this outcome of whoever she met, wherever she was, would have been different had she known some type of defense in it. The big thing that I've noticed here in Botswana is this is one of the most peaceful countries, if not the most peaceful country I've ever went to anywhere in the world. Everything here is met with a smile and a demela, and it's great. Keep it, don't lose it. But at the end of the day, you have to be prepared for war. And as you mentioned, statistics, especially with GBV, rape, even human trafficking now, has gone up so much. You need to arm yourself with the necessary skill set to not necessarily not be victimized, but to at least preserve your life alive. So it hit home really, really much when I saw that young lady exposed like she was in the newspaper.
We continue this conversation on the Moving Humanity Forward podcast. Stay with us. Welcome back. This is the Moving Humanity Forward podcast, and I want to get straight back into conversation with Grandmaster Scott, where you've just taken us through the birthing of the Khonze movement. I met you just as that was happening. Take us through what the Khonze movement is, and I think it would be so important for us to tie that into now where you bring in your martial arts expertise, because I want to believe there is a significance to that. There's a tying in, because you said you looked at this picture and you're thinking, what could this person have done to help themselves if they had some sort of martial arts training? Now, you said Botswana is very peaceful. We don't expect that. But unfortunately, more and more it does happen. You are
Yeah.
taken by surprise. And I think that's where the martial arts can come in. So maybe start with the Hunzi movement. Take us through what that is, what your intention is with it, what it was, and what it is now.
Yeah. First, I chose the name Hunsi based on the 2002 movie of the same name called Enough
By J Lo.
with Jennifer Lopez, J Lo. She was in that movie, and the premise was basically the same. A woman who was a victim of gender based violence. The ex husband was connected to, I think, the police department in some shape, form, and fashion. So he was always able to know her whereabouts and movements and that type of stuff. It was a very violent movie because aside from abusing her, it was also a time when their shared child was there, and the abuser actually hit the child. So enough. She was sent to her estranged father. They didn't have a good relationship, but enough where they could talk. He suggested that she go and see a friend of his who was a martial artist. And he put her on a regimen of learning how to defend herself and protect herself, even in the midst of hot battle. And when it seemed like everything was down and at the last rope, how to defend herself and come back on it. So I thought that was a fitting name to call my program Enough.
Yeah.
Enough. We've had enough. The Hunsi program is a specialized self-defense program for women. What makes it specialized is the person that's teaching it. Because I pull from my years of experience with law enforcement, military, martial arts training, security training, that type of stuff. And I've honed it down to quick, easy things that even the shortest and the smallest stature person could use, but effective enough to take out somebody my size. It's quick, fast, in a hurry. Not only does it deal with hand-to-hand combat, everything from takedown and moves and captures and grabs and pulls, but also using day-to-day weapons that coffee cups, fingernail files, chopsticks, the cooking spoons that you use in the villages with the pap in the three-legged pots, traditional brooms, whatever the case may be. Understanding and learning how to use those as weapons as well too. So that's how it becomes specialized. It's very intensive. And it's a long process. I don't want people to think that they can come to learn martial arts just in 6 easy lessons and it's done. No, this is something that you constantly have to train on and something that's ongoing and continuing education. So that's what the main premise of Hunsi is. And the focus is to give women and young ladies and girls here the opportunity not to be victimized, or even most importantly, not to be unalived. I think is the word that people use now. Not to die. And I mean that's that simple. That's my gift that I want to give to Botswana to help combat this issue of gender-based violence.
Now, I recall at the time, literally, it was a gift from your heart and your pocket when you started this. And I recall even hosting you on radio where you were saying, listen, whichever part of the country you're in, just get at least 10 women, find the space, call me, I will come. And you were doing this from, like I said, your pocket and your heart. And I know at the time you were trying to reach out to partners to say, help me facilitate this, let's mobilize this, let's do it all around the country. This is something we need. I'm not sure how far that went, but I can only imagine it would have drained everything. So take me through what happened then and what is happening now. Where is the Hunzi movement?
Well, the Hunter movement is still very much alive, but it of course had to undergo transformations. As you mentioned, again, out of my heart, I wanted everybody who was available to be able to take advantage of it. So as you mentioned, I started here and wanted to go around the country. And even here in Gabs, I was in different locations, Malapo Crossing. I was in a couple of parks and rec areas, Shola Fellow in different areas to give this program. But oddly enough, and it was for free.
Yeah.
And FREE for free. And nobody, I'm not going to say nobody. The turnout was it lacked, and I wondered about this. And it's not that I don't think that women here know that they need to be able to defend themselves, but I think a lot of it has to do with maybe the culture and the understanding that that's a thing that other people do, and that's a thing that men do. And if I get into martial arts of any type, even whether it's even boxing, it'll affect my femininity. My breasts won't grow, or I won't be able to have kids, or I'll throw off my cycle, or just crazy things like this. When in fact we need to get past those and learn how to defend yourself and learn how not to be a victim. So it's important that we understand that, yes, you may know you need it, but then you have to implement it.
Yeah.
You have to say, hey, there's people out there, there's somebody other than me who's out there. I don't care whether you train with me or train with anybody else in any other martial arts programs. Learn how to defend yourself. Learn how not to be victim, because it's not about you. It may be you today. It could be mom tomorrow. It could be your kids. It could be nieces, cousins, aunts, whatever. That's a way that we can make a difference and still gain our confidence back, especially if you're a survivor.
Yeah.
Dignity, self-respect, confidence, and the understanding that now at least I can walk with my head up, even though that may have happened. That's something that happened to me in the past. But today is a new day. I come with a new understanding of who I am and what my purpose is here. And, just try me. You're with the wrong person. You can try if you want to, devil. You can try if you want to, but I'm not going to suggest it. Now, I'm not saying going around being a bad person and thinking I'm whooping everybody's behind and stuff. Martial arts doesn't enable you to be a super person. Bruce Lee couldn't chop a bullet out the air. So when we talk about these things, we have to talk about them in moderation and understanding. This is just to give you the necessary tools that you have, because the husband may not be with you all the time. The boyfriend may not be with you all the time. Kids going to school, you may not be with them all the time. You send them to the tuck shop and they end up being victimized. A lady coming in after work, going to the shops, talking on the cell phone and everything. She needs to have awareness as well too. The program not only deals with the physical part. The physical part is the bottom. But again, using my years of experience, we deal with situational awareness, environmental awareness, spiritual awareness, emotional awareness. All these things come into play when you talk about combat and how effective you will be in defending yourself or third party of the life of somebody else. So that's what the HONSI program is in a nutshell.
So I recall you reached out to a couple of stakeholders. Talk to me about those who you have partnered with. And I think something came out of those conversations or those attempts you made to reach out with people that I think is an interesting one. I'd like you to share about how some said, oh, this is a bit too violent, this is not our path, but and then there's a partner I believe that you met at the time, Victor, and I think even up to now you are still partnering with him. So take me through some of the partnerships and responses you got.
We are. This is a young brother who I've met like I'm a brother to you. This is a younger brother to me, Victor Lashoma. I will say his name unapologetically. The CEO of Bonvic Holdings, Bonvic Bouncers. We got together and partnered because he has the same zest and zeal for not only security, personal protection, but also for the GBV issues. We've done programs in places like Malapo Crossing and several other places that we've partnered together to offer women these self-defense skills that they need. Fast forward into now, I've been able to now become the security consultant on a full-time basis for several different NGOs dealing with those.
I believe the Botswana.
Yeah, one of the big ones. Yeah, Botswana Gender-Based Violence Prevention Center.
Yeah.
Malau Matters.
Okay.
I can say these names. Ratong Center. From time they all use my expertise in security in some shape, form, or fashion, whether it's training the staff or and giving them the skills that they need, or if it's involving engaging survivors who've been through that, to again help them to regain dignity and self-expression and pride and confidence about themselves too. So yeah, it's been good and it's taken off in a different direction, and I thank God for that.
One of the things that you and I have spoken about is just what needs to happen next. as far as the fight against GBV is concerned. And one of the things you have mentioned time and again is that it needs to be led by a man.
Yes, yes, ma'am.
We have to get more intentional about how we are grooming our boy child. So I'd like you to speak a little bit to that. And then you didn't actually respond to the what you're doing is too violent issue. Just throw that in for me quickly.
Yeah, going from that latter question that you just asked. Yeah, again, coming to a culture like Botswana, very nice and peaceful. And then when I finally got into teaching my formal Chinese martial arts students the traditional techniques that I came from, and remembering that martial meaning warlike, is fighting arts. So at some point in time, you're going to be putting the hurt on the other person, and then teaching techniques, and then the whole student body was there, whether it was the Hunzi program or whether it was my formal students looking at me like, this guy has lost his entire mind. We can't do that. It's too violent. No, hela, wena. Looking at that, and I'm going like, oh my God, how am I going to get across to these people that at some point in time, you have to make contact with a body. At some point in time, you have to be able to put some people down, not necessarily to engage in a long fight, but enough to be able to escape and preserve your life alive. So yeah, it was a lot of pushback on, it's too violent as far as that. In terms of the other question was partnerships and
going forward, what do you think the GBV movement needs to look like?
Definitely, as we mentioned and talked about several times, no woman any longer needs to be on the forefront, guys, talking about gender-based violence. This needs to be an all male-led coalition. No more marches, no more awareness days. We already know what the problem is. We're aware of it. But are we coming to the table with solutions? And I think because men are probably known as the majority perpetrators, even though GBV also happens to guys in isolated instances, we need to be on the forefront pushing gender-based violence initiatives across the board, whether it's in legislation, whether it's in churches, wherever it is. And it's very important that programs be created, benchmark, and continued for mentorship of young boys, young men, elders, young adult males. It all needs to start with us. And the two main things that need to be addressed with these young people is conflict resolution and anger management. Those two things. You can see it on any playground you go to at any school. You had a group of little girls over here cackling and doing little girl stuff. And then you see the guys over here trying to flex their plex and deal with masculinity and issues like that. And a lot of these issues happen, unfortunately, at home, where they may be, as a child, in an environment where gender-based violence happens, whether it's from the person that's a biological father or not, whether it's a boyfriend or uncle or relative, God forbid, these things are happening. They still need to be able to process these things. In addition to explaining to them the conflict management, anger management, there also needs to be counselors and psychosocial people on property, on call, to being able to engage these young people, to be able to process, because we have issues processing it as adults. Can you imagine the effect it has on a young man mind seeing these things and not being able to process and thinking, growing up thinking that's the norm, that's the status quo, this is how you handle it. So again, those are things that I want to do with my GBV going forward, especially into this year. Ladies, no offense to you, but the attention now must switch to men being on the forefront and being on the march for gender-based violence.
I love that. And I think in closing, I just would like you to just highlight how, or the way in which martial arts ties in to a healing sort of, especially I think when we think about the military, you know, that training, that environment that you were in, and how coming out of that, I believe martial arts played a huge role. I'd like you to just share how even within the instance of a survivor of any type of assault, martial arts can assist. And I think that's one of the things that the Khonze movement offers uniquely.
It does, because again, pulling on the issues that I personally dealt with PTSD, post traumatic stress disorder, martial arts helped out tremendously in as much it helps you to be centered, it helps you to focus, and not necessarily on the harder aspects of it too. Like I also teach Tai Chi Chuan, as it's known too, which I'm pretty sure everybody's familiar with it here in Botswana. It helps you to again release negative energies mentally, emotionally, and physically. It helps you to center yourself and understand that you are important in this world. That energy and creative energy and God's creation energy is here and it dwells within you. That there's a bigger purpose for you here. And once you are taught and you engage and immerse yourself in the understanding of how martial arts is able to heal with that, it becomes almost addictive, like going to the gym and you want to get that certain burn at the gym and stuff. Training in martial arts helps out, even if it's the harder arts where you're punching on heavy bags. Again, just being able to express and get the trauma off of you mentally and physically, whether you're shouting to the top of your voice, crying, soul crying, as we discussed, like the little kids before, just getting it off and healing. And then the healing process can begin from there. So yeah, martial arts have definitely been an integral part of the transforming and the healing process for survivors.
That's all the time we have for today. I have so many more questions. If you have questions, let us know so we call Grandmaster Scott back and get into a sort of part 2 on the Moving Humanity Forward podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. Please remember to like our page on Facebook, MHF Podcast, and also on YouTube as well as on TikTok, Moving Humanity Forward podcast. My name is Kathy Malajari. We'll see you next week.